Tide may be turning for NVIDIA after what's been a choppy performance so far this year, with President Trump saying the U.S. will allow the company to sell some of its chips to China for a 25% fee. CNBC senior tech reporter Arjun Gopal joins me now from London with much more on this story. Arjun, good morning. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Frank. This is such a fascinating story, I think, because the story this year hasn't been so much if NVIDIA has been allowed to sell its chips to China. The big question has been whether China actually wants them. And this debate's going to continue at this point. Just to set the context, remember, back earlier this year, the US was granting NVIDIA permission to sell its H200 chip. This is the lower performing chip that was specifically designed for the Chinese market to China. But Beijing was telling its local firms to not buy those NVIDIA chips. Now that it's being allowed to sell its H200, that same question will resurface. Will China allow its local companies to buy the chip? And I think there's arguments why it may not. If you think back early this year, Jensen Huang himself actually said that he saw Huawei, the local Chinese players, own chips being comparable to the H200. So in that scenario, why would local companies want to buy the chips, particularly at a time when China continues to push that self-sufficiency narrative, trying to build out its own domestic supply chain as well when it comes to AI chips. And finally, just off the back of the earnings calls over the past few weeks from Chinese tech giants, they're saying that they're building very performant models right now, AI models, on a mix of NVIDIA chips that's stockpiled from before the ban, as well as own domestic supply chain. However, there is a world in which China does buy these chips, and that's thinking about the H200. It's one of NVIDIA's most advanced chips. It's far more advanced than H20, and the performance of that chip may be tempting enough for Chinese companies to want to buy, and for Beijing to allow their companies buy to advance the local AI scene in China. And the other point here as well, there is a supply crunch in terms of these Chinese companies being able to get their hands on enough chips, and certainly China's own manufacturers cannot produce enough of the chips they need. So that's where the H200 again becomes quite a tempting option. We haven't heard official word at this point from the Chinese government. At this point, President Trump says that he believes President Xi Jinping is quite happy with this arrangement. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the coming days and weeks, Frank.
All right, so Arjun, you said there's a question if they really want. You say there's a world where they may want them. Although these are not the most advanced chips, there are better chips in the H20. So why isn't this an improvement? I know they didn't want the H20, but why isn't this a step forward until, at least hypothetically, China can ramp up its own domestic chip industry?
Yeah, it certainly could be a stopgap measure for now. I think longer term, it's certainly the goals, the aims of the Chinese government to get the country's AI industry running on broadly domestic produced and designed chips at this point. But right now, this is where the H200 is quite tempting. It's not, as you mentioned, the most advanced chip, but it's a huge improvement on the H20, and certainly can be better than some of the domestic alternatives in China. But I think it all goes back to geopolitics and geopolitical standing at this point. Does China want to be seen as kind of, taking this concession on at this point for the US government? And the other part is, how does this feed into broader discussions between the US and China over other areas like rare earth, for example, and some of these other tech blockades as well? So all of these things are going to play into China's mind as it decides whether or not to allow local companies to buy the H200, Frank.
Saying NVIDIA is going to be allowed to sell AI chips to China, though it's not its best chips. Christina Partsinevelos joins us now with more on that. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, President Trump, like you said, has approved specifically the sale of NVIDIA's H200 chips to China, with the U.S. government taking roughly a 25% cut of revenue. Let's call it a fee. That's up from the previous 15% fee on other China-specific chip models. And this is according to a Trump post on Truth Social, suggesting the same actual approach would also apply to AMD and NVIDIA. NVIDIA called it, quote, a thoughtful balance that benefits the United States. CEO Jensen Huang has argued that blocking China's access won't stop China's AI progress. It will just accelerate domestic rivals that could challenge U.S. firms globally. But Washington's approval is only half the battle. Chinese media is calling this desperation, arguing the U.S. is easing restrictions because NVIDIA is losing its foothold as domestic alternatives surge. There are some bloggers are labeling the H200 a sugar-coated bullet with the same backdoor security concerns that led China to block the other H20 chips earlier this year. And the FT reporting just this morning that Chinese regulators are considering restricting the very same H200 chips that just got the green light to ship. Beijing has been pouring billions of dollars into domestic alternative. Bernstein expects China's local AI chip supply to grow 5 times larger by 2028. And the reason for that is they just don't want to be reliant on American technology. That's why Mizuho argues in a note just last night that even though NVIDIA and also AMD have an inventory of Chinese chips, the quote, upside is potentially limited. Washington said yes, but China could still say no. And that's the real test for whether this translates into actual revenue for NVIDIA. So
because you think ultimately that they're just not going to be able to sell these things into China? That's
we recall,
question?
So President Trump allowed the H-20s to go through, then the Chinese government blocked the H-20s. They particularly focused on the backdoor security concerns. H-200s are part of the same family, albeit much, much more powerful in terms of memory. So the argument is that they're going to just go ahead and potentially block it anyways because it's from the same family and they really just want access to Blackwells.
So this is just a lot of theater? What are we talking about then?
What I'm saying is that perhaps investors should be a little bit cautious to celebrate right away. Because think about AMD. Just last week, Lisa Su, she said that on stage at an event that she did receive licenses to ship specifically their Chinese chip. But she said that they are prepared to pay the 15% I keep saying tax, but it's not a tax, it's a fee, which implies that...
I thought it was 25%.
Well, now it's 25, but last week it was 15, right? For AMD, Intel, and NVIDIA. And so even if they get the green light, first they have to get the Chinese approval, and then they also have to go through the paperwork of getting those licenses approved and then shipping. So it may not necessarily be something that you'd see upside in the next quarter per se. Some people are saying if you look at when it was previously blocked, they brought in about $7 billion per quarter for China. So that is a sizable source of revenue. But at this point, how much is already lost to now domestic alternatives?
Where are you on the sort of AI bubble question right now?
Bubble is a tricky question because I think oftentimes when people say bubble, they're implying that we're nearing sort of an end. And I don't think we're nearing an end. I think we still probably have 2 to 4 years left in this AI bull market that we're living in. I think we're certainly inflating something. And the nature of technologically driven booms sort of invites bubbles to happen. They're actually part of why we get these booms, in my opinion, because you get this supposed excess capital. What it really does is it subsidizes the ability for new companies to offer technology to very large user bases like an OpenAI, who has almost 1 billion users now. And these bubbles allow for those sort of technologies to really break out. And so the direct answer to your question is, I don't think we're near a bubble burst. I think we still have a few years left, but I think certainly a bubble is something we'll be paying attention to for most of those few years.
I would like everybody to just assume that China is a bonus opportunity in the future. At the moment, we got plenty of, our demand is really strong, as you know. Demand is really skyrocketing. And over the next couple of years, we've got a lot of demand we have to go serve. And if China comes along, which I believe is going to be in the best interest of the United States as well as China and the rest of the world, that's going to be a huge bonus opportunity for us.
NVIDIA's Jensen Huang on this show last week talking about opportunities in China. Shares of the tech giant are up in the pre-market. The president says he will let the company sell its H200 chips to China, with the U.S. receiving a 25% cut. In a Truth Social post, he said he informed President Xi about that decision and that the shipments would be allowed under conditions that allow for strong national security. Meantime, sources tell the FT that Beijing is set to limit access to those H200 chips despite the president's decision. Meanwhile, Jim, cover the journals about the Chinese trade surplus at $1 trillion, biggest in recorded economic history.
You got to go back to what Jensen's been saying all along about China. Gigantic market. If they decide that they want to have the code writers, or if the code writers want to be on NVIDIA, it's game, set, match. The fact that the stock is up this small, after the stock running all the way up to 200 is unfathomable to me. This is the market. You had to be in it. They will dominate this market. They used to dominate this market. There's no reason to think that a Huawei chip is anywhere near what NVIDIA chip. I've listened for the last month about castigation of NVIDIA's power. And yet when you talk with the people like Gemini, are they going to do ads? You think you can do ads on their thing? You need the next generation NVIDIA chip to be able to reason and do the ads that you want. I just cannot believe how people just...
Now, this is the H200. It is far more powerful than the H20.
I was surprised they got that.
Yeah. Now, it's not the high-end chips. The highest end, Blackwell, or what is to come.
Huawei?
It's probably better. That said, the Chinese have been developing more and more powerful chips. Their compute has been coming along. It is not the equal of ours. By the way, on the software side and on the large language model side, they also have been developing a great deal, as we know.
But this is the training chip. It's not the inference chip. That's really
right.
I
It's
would
training,
that as
it's training for
fabulous.
the models. Now, that all said, it's not. We haven't heard, Carl, from the Chinese as to whether they're going to accept this.
Why would they ever say it? What, are they going to issue a release? They're going to tell the information?
Well,
we're like,
they did say no to
big.
the H20. They did say no.
Who the hell,
you
if
can't
you're
use
China,
it.
is going to say, hey, listen, let's have this squawk on the street gang. Let's tell them it's going to be huge. What? The Chinese are smarter than us when it comes to bargaining. They'll probably say they don't want it at all, and then they'll be buying the heck out of it. That's what they do. They're not stupid.
So you think the sell side starts folding this into models?
The sell side's been so wrong. The sell side's got the long knives out.
Yep.
And they get to that GTC conference later, they're going to be like lapdogs.
And even with the
lapdogs.
25%,
give me the kibbles.
A 25% payment to the U.S. government, which still is kind of, I don't know.
It's a surtax.
Have we ever seen that before? Is there something?
No, because the Constitution says you can't tax exports.
The Constitution. You're going to bring that up?
The old Constitution.
Hey, they got a commerce clause, pretty much allows anything.
Okay, but even with paying 25% to the U.S. government, however strange that may be, their margins are strong enough they'll still make money on this, right?
Oh my God, the margins are unbelievable for the best I've ever seen. I mean, remember when Intel got to 70? These guys are higher than that.
These guys are higher than that.
Andy Grove said,
right?
we're done. You'll never see, the CEO of Intel will never see a gross margin again like this. These guys, look, this stock is not going up because the media is so cynical and nihilist toward this company. It's ridiculous. This company, you cannot work without this. Oh, we'll train you. Oh, well, TPUs. I love Broadcom. It's my largest position in my trust. But what are we going to say? Like NVIDIA just doesn't know what it's doing? I couldn't believe they got to 200.
It's the media's fault.
Yes, the media has been so bearish on NVIDIA.
The media has turned on every turn. I spend all my time correcting the media on NVIDIA.
Yeah,
I'm waiting
the
to hear.
media is an amazing trader. They're constantly in and out trying to trade this stock.
This is an individually owned stock. I've never seen anything like it. And they get the stuff.
I wonder why. I wonder who in the media may have actually influenced people.
Well,
I can't. I
look,
don't know.
If it's the greatest,
oh, that media. Oh,
if it's the greatest performing stock of all time,
Yeah.
I retire.
Careful.
All right, I hope you're all doing well today and staying calm in this market. Yesterday, the president confirmed online that the U.S. would allow NVIDIA to sell the H200 in China, and the U.S. government would collect 25% of the H200 China sales. The president said he spoke to President Xi of China about the situation, and that President Xi responded positively. Then this morning, the Financial Times published an article saying that according to two people familiar with the matter, Chinese regulators are discussing ways to permit limited access to NVIDIA's H200 as the country seeks self-sufficiency in semiconductor production. According to the sources, there will probably be an approval process wherein companies in China would have to explain to regulators why domestic providers were unable to meet their needs. A final decision has not been made on the matter. I don't know if this article is true or not, and I'm just bringing it to your attention so that you're aware of it. That said, the FT has a very good track record of accurately reporting on NVIDIA China rumors, so that is worth bearing in mind. Now I want to make an important distinction here. Chinese tech companies absolutely want access to NVIDIA chips, and they would gladly use the H200 if they were allowed to. The question is whether or not the Chinese government will allow the chips as they are determined to expedite development of their own domestic ecosystem that is not reliant on American technology. We also have to consider that a bipartisan group of senators recently introduced a bill that would block sales of NVIDIA's Blackwell and H200 to China for 30 months. And so we need to consider that situation as well. If tensions ease, and if we eventually get the all clear from the administration, the Chinese government and Congress for NVIDIA to sell the H200 in China, then I think we would likely see a notable move in the stock, and we would promptly see many analysts upgrade their NVIDIA price targets. In the short term, there are still a lot of questions as to whether or not NVIDIA China sales will happen in meaningful volumes. Another possibility to consider is that perhaps the Chinese government could reject the H200 initially in a sort of show of strength type of move before ultimately allowing the sales to go through. All of that remains to be seen. The good news is that regardless of what happens with the China situation, NVIDIA's business is accelerating even without having any exposure to China, and that is what we should be focusing on from the perspective of long-term investors. We have a few important events this week. FOMC on Wednesday, Oracle earnings Wednesday after the bell, and Broadcom earnings Thursday after market close. Both Both of these companies' earnings will have important implications for the broader AI ecosystem and for NVIDIA, so be prepared for those two earnings reports this week. Also, I'll briefly mention that Iron shared a video online showing progress at their Childress site, where they are building Horizon data centers for the contract they recently secured with Microsoft. Additionally, Iron recently closed the senior convertible notes offering that we discussed in recent videos. You may remember that Iron issued 2 batches of notes worth a total of $2 billion, and Iron also provided purchasers with the option to purchase an additional $300 million worth of notes. The $300 million greenshoe was fully exercised, which is a very good sign. I continue to be bullish on Iron for at least the next 1 to 2 years. The recent offerings do not concern me at all, as I've explained in greater detail in previous videos. Now going back to NVIDIA, I don't know what the stock will do in the short term, but I continue to be bullish on NVIDIA from a long-term perspective. I also continue to think that most analysts' long-term NVIDIA estimates are too low given what's ahead. Today, most analysts are hyper-focused on NVIDIA's data center business, especially the cloud service providers. But we have to consider that NVIDIA has many other large long-term growth opportunities in front of it that are in addition to their massive hyperscaler-driven data center business. Sovereign AI, enterprise AI, many AI-native startups, quantum GPU, supercomputing, and physical AI. While I expect NVIDIA's data center business to continue growing strong, I think the long-term growth of some of NVIDIA's other business segments and customer segments are being overlooked today. As for physical AI, NVIDIA CFO recently said that physical AI addresses, quote, a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity and the next leg of growth for NVIDIA. This is not getting enough attention, but I think it will get a lot of attention in 2026 and 2027. NVIDIA sells the hardware for the data centers where the models are trained. They offer Omniverse where the models are taught and tested. And NVIDIA also sells the hardware that allows on-device real-time inference through NVIDIA AGX, allowing robots to have intelligent interactions with the real world even when they are not connected to a data center. Notice that NVIDIA is taking a holistic platform approach to physical AI, and they're embedding themselves as the underlying foundation supporting all of it. Over 2 million developers are already building on the NVIDIA robotics stack, and this is not getting enough attention. I continue to think that most analysts' long-term NVIDIA estimates are too low given what's ahead. As for production ramps, Blackwell Ultra is ramping very quickly right now, leading to revenue growth acceleration. Rubin is on track to launch in 2026. Then we're expecting Rubin CPX at the end of 2026. Later on, we're expecting the launch of Rubin Ultra in 2027 and Feynman after that in 2028. We have a clear data center product roadmap stretching into 2028, and Jensen believes there will be $3 to $4 trillion of global AI factory buildout between now and 2030. That means Jensen is expecting growing AI demand and an expanding total addressable market underpinning all of this. I don't think we are anywhere near any type of bubble bursting type of event. With all of this in mind, I seriously think that NVIDIA still has plenty of runway ahead of it, and I think this company will be worth substantially more in future years than it is today. At least that's my view of the situation. Remember to stay calm in this market. Remember to maintain a long-term perspective, and do not make any hasty or irrational decisions. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.